City, and welcome to the Salt Lake City Council formal meeting for Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. I am Councilmember Dan Dugan, and I will be conducting this meeting today. And welcome. We are happy to have you here, whether in person or on Zoom, or watching on one of our live feeds. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever manner you feel most comfortable. Since we have a larger crowd this evening, I want to let people know that there's also an overflow down the hall in the Cannon Room in room 335, which is just across the center stairways. You can view and listen to the meeting there. Also, there's chairs. We will call 4 names at a time for our public and general comments so that people will have time to return to room 326 to make their comments. This is room 326. Thank you for your understanding and participation. So please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, moving on, welcome into public meeting rules. Thank you again for everyone to join us tonight. Before we move through the agenda, I want to mention and remind everyone about our rules of decorum, which are in place to ensure our meetings move along well and to help everyone feel comfortable sharing their comments. A copy of the full rules of decorum are available at the door, and our staff will post the link in Zoom. This will bring us to item A4, and the City Council will approve the work session meeting minutes of June 13th, 2023, August 8th, 2023, August 15th, 2023, as well as the formal meeting minutes of June 6th, 2023, and August 15th, 2023. I will look for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Apoya, a second from Councilman Valdemorals. Any discussions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? And that passes 7-0 unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, Council will consider adopting a joint ceremonial resolution with Mayor Mendenhall recognizing September as National Suicide Prevention and Action Month. I'll now turn the time over to Councilmember Mono to read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's my honor to read a resolution. This is a joint resolution declaring September 2023 as National Suicide Prevention Month in Salt Lake City. Whereas September is known nationally as Suicide Prevention Month, and whereas according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is the 9th leading cause of death among adults in Utah, and the leading cause of death for Utahns aged 10 to 24 years old. And whereas also according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Utah averages 651 suicides per year. And whereas on average more than 48,000 lives are lost from suicide in the United States each year, which averages about 132 suicides per day. And whereas every life lost directly affects the victim's family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, and community, and whereas mental health and suicide prevention services are accessible and available through the Salt Lake County Health Department, by calling 1-800-273-TALK-8255 to be connected to a skilled, trained counselor at a crisis center in your area anytime, 24/7. And whereas Salt Lake City values those who work daily to help better the lives of others through their professions in mental health care, education, emergency services, and many more. Now therefore be it resolved that the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor of Salt Lake City recognize the month of September 2023 as National Suicide Prevention Month in Salt Lake City. Be it further resolved, Salt Lake City encourages all residents to familiarize themselves with mental health education and treatment resources, and recognize how a healthy mind can help us better care for ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Mono. I will look for a motion.
Move for approval. Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Wharton, a second from Councilmember Puig. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously 7-0. Thank you very much for that. And I would want to introduce Elisa Burnham, who's here tonight. Thank you very much for joining us here to receive this resolution. And Elisa, do you have any, serves as a coordinator of the suicide prevention program in Salt Lake County. Thank you for being here today. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes.
Yes. And just make sure that little green light's on.
The light's on.
Gotcha.
Suicide is a profound and complex public health issue that has unfortunately touched many of our lives. Just like with any other health concern, it's important to educate ourselves about it. Whether it's taking a suicide prevention training or learning the warning signs and what resources are available, we all have a role we can play in preventing suicides. Live On Utah is our state suicide prevention campaign, and everyone can visit liveonutah.org to learn about what you can do to help save a life. Establishing suicide prevention as a priority for all Salt Lake City residents is a positive step toward empowering the community with the knowledge and skills to prevent suicide, a step towards reducing stigma surrounding mental health, and ultimately a step towards saving lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa, and thank you very much for your work. I appreciate this, especially when you see that the leading cause of death of 8 to 24-year-olds is suicide. It's that's sad, and so I appreciate your work, and we all need to just make sure that we stay better educated and look for those warning signs, so we can alleviate some of those unneeded, necessary deaths. So appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I would like to say thank you so much for bringing this up. Thank you for this joint resolution, but also for the people that are listening out there. We do have a chat program where you can call. You can call 911 or you can call 799-3000 if you're having a mental health issue, or if you're thinking of suicide. Please call us. Please call our police department, and we'll be able to send you social workers and clinicians that can help you with the issue that you're having at that time. Please don't let it get that far. So our chat team, 911-799-3000. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Picture? Sure. Picture?
Would you take a picture with us?
All right.
Do you want the resolution or no?
Moving on to item B, public hearings. This brings us to the council's public hearings. If you'd like to make a comment on a public hearing today, we are accepting comments in person or online in Zoom. The council has been informed of accommodations requests during the public comment tonight and welcome comments from all constituents. If you need to speak with our staff, please select Isaac Canedo from the list of participants. If you need to, you can also raise your hand in Zoom to indicate that you need something from the host. Taylor Hill on our staff will be calling those who wish to comment based on the order we receive the names. She will call 4 names at a time. If you are in person, please be sure to return to room 326, this room, to make your comment. If you're on Zoom, please unmute your mic when Taylor calls your name. Our first public hearing item is B1, is regarding a grant application for Summer Food Service Programs 2023 for the Youth City. And before making comments, I'm going to turn the time over to Sylvia Richards, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short introduction. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Mr.
Sophia.
Chair. The city periodically receives and applies for some grants, and they help to pay for some city programs. The council always holds a public hearing for each of the grants to allow the council and public an opportunity to receive additional information. And tonight, as you mentioned, there is one grant, the Summer Food Service Program 2023 for Youth City Summer Programming. This funding will be used to provide daily snacks for youth participating in those programs. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Taylor? Take the first commenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It looks like there is no one registered to speak to this item.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer item B1 to a future consent agenda for action.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Puyi, second from Councilmember Petro. Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'm not sure if this mic works. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously 7-0. Moving on to item B2, regarding an ordinance form-based urban neighborhood zoning text amendment. Before we make any comments, we'll take any comments. I'll turn it over to Nick Tarbett, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short intro.
So this is a public hearing about a proposal to create the form-based mixed-use 11 zoning district, formerly known as the FBUN3. That is simply a change in the name there, as well as an ordinance that would amend this zoning to the Fleet Block, which is approximately located between 800 and 900 South and 300 and 400 West.
Thank you, Nick. And Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are 8 people here to speak to this item. The first will be Isabella Grove, followed by Brad Auger, and then Peter Caroon. Isabella, you may now unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm just emailing because I don't think that there should be a new zoning district for this neighborhood, and it's just because that the Fleet Block is located within this area, and it's a really important space for everyone within our community. So my family and I have gone there a couple of times, and it's just super important. I think that this is a place of remembrance to those who have lost their lives to police brutality and violence. And some of these people we all know, Breonna Taylor, Bernardo Palacios, Ryan Outlaw, and George Floyd, among many others. And I think many community members who have lost their family come here to grieve and to heal. And people who may have not lost someone they know, but whose community is targeted, can also come here and heal. And those who don't have anyone who's been affected by police brutality can come here and learn and just be able to be around other people. So I think it's a really important place. So that's all I had to say about this issue. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
next will be Brad Auger, followed by Peter Caroon, then Jerry Schmidt, and Levi Woodruff. Brad, you may now unmute. Okay, I will troubleshoot with Brad, and we will move on to Peter Caroon. Peter, you may now unmute.
Thank you for a few minutes of your time today. I know you've talked about the Fleet Block many times, and this zoning as well. And I've reviewed the zoning, and as an employee of Century Financial, who owns the 1.25 acres on the Fleet Block, we are generally supportive of the new form-based zone. The one issue we have is related between the zoning and how you've proposed to lay out the fleet block. So currently the side yards have zero setback requirements under the form-based zoning. So the way you've got the proposed fleet block layout has basically 3 parcels plus the park, and our parcel, the 1.25 acres on the corner of 900 South and 400 West, is sort of left out of that. And so if we build our building on the 1.25 acres and the proposed building next to us to the east on the 1 acre parcel that's being proposed build their building, then if neither of us have a setback requirement, what you've created is essentially 2 buildings back to back next to each other without any kind of setbacks. And so we'd love to talk to you a little bit further about how the parcels have been laid out, but with the 0 setback requirements for side yards. If we decide to build a building and the person on the 1 acre decides to build a building, then you're going to have some conflicts between the 2 properties.
Next will be Jerry Schmidt, followed by Levi Woodruff, and then Tiffany and Raven James and Colin Williams. Jerry is here in person.
Miss Jared, right? Northwest quadrant?
Just to clarify, we've had some questions about this. There is no specific public hearing for the North Point Small Area Plan, and so many of the people who are speaking on that will speak during general comment. The council will accept that. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. So Taylor, Gerald will be speaking at the general comments later on this evening.
We will move on to Levi Woodruff, followed by Tiffany and Raven James, then Colin Williams and Kara Cope. Levi is here in person.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Levi Woodruff, and I would like to use this time to urge the council and the administration to really listen to the families of those people who are memorialized in the Fleet Block murals and to make decisions about this property based on what the families and the community want. When I read about the form-based urban neighborhood zone, I worry that the intent is to build more unaffordable apartments and boutique stores that the people of the Fleet Block neighborhood won't be able to use. This neighborhood deserves a true community center where people can receive services to help with food security, housing, employment, mental health, and other essential needs. Just as important, a government needs the trust of its community to function, and you do not build and maintain trust by asking people's opinion and then seeming to ignore it. The families and the community members who cherish and care for the Fleet Block space and the memory of those who are honored there deserve better than a process that ignores them. Please use this space as these families have asked, and they have asked for a space that will truly serve that community, especially those who are most in need in it. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Tiffany and Raven James, followed by Colin Williams and then Kara Cope. Tiffany and Raven are here in person.
Thank you guys for hearing our public comment.
Yeah, you need to speak right into the mic. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Tiffany James. I'm here with my daughter, Raven James. My 19-year-old son, Zane James, was unlawfully killed by a police officer in 2018. Zane's one of the many beautiful faces that make up the police shooting victims mural on Fleet Block. We have participated for the last 3 years in discussions with the city, and I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that you made. We're here to request the city requires the integrity of the messaging and the mission of the murals is specifically maintained in whatever new zoning definition languages that gets passed. And there be specific requirements of the developer to also build into their plans a community center that fills the needs of the community that they're building in. This type of requirement in zoning language is both easily done and it is absolutely imperative because it maintains the trust in the city by the community that's been bestowed along the course of these discussions. It doesn't abandon all of these discussions. It doesn't abandon the mission and the messaging that is embedded in those murals. The city supported the installation of police shooting victims murals at Fleet Block initially. And they did this when police misconduct was getting a lot of national attention. The goal of the murals was to both humanize the victims and raise awareness on the deep impact of police violence to not just the individuals, but to the families and the community members. Now we understand that the city now wants to move on from this chapter of Fleet Block and redevelop the property. We understand this, right? But we're supportive of urban improvement. Our family is and the other families are. But in general, we're just disappointed that the efforts by the city have been to whitewash the existence and the meaning behind the murals as they do this redevelopment.
Right?
Is that time?
Thank you. Yes.
We appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Next will be Colin Williams, followed by Kara Cope, and then we will circle back to Brad Auger. Colin is here in person.
Thank you, council members. First of all, I do want to commend the city on trying to create a mixed-use zoning to help us have a more walkable infrastructure for the future. In general, I look at the FB11 and I worry about a few different things on the mixed-use nature. With retail being optional, it's going to possibly create a scenario where people still need cars clogging our traffic ways and not having a walkable city 10, 20, or 30 years from now. And I hope that you guys reconsider that as a whole for FB11. Now, we've noticed that there's certain carve-outs specific to the Fleet Block that you have made in FB11, showing us that specific carve-outs can be made to the zoning ordinance to take special consideration of this important piece to the community. Now, as Utah, we're kind of known nationally as a joke of a city where it's a place you go if you feel Vermont is too diverse, or a city whose diversity is cut in half when the Jazz are in an away game. And we can change that. Right now, we've seen the comment not only from members of our community who have lost people, but in general, the minority communities in the area who see this as an important part of the community, an important part of the history. Utah is a state that recognizes history and those who have come before us more than any other state I've ever had the privilege of living in or being in. We can make special carve-outs clearly in this zoning ordinance to, at minimum, make sure that we do not lose this piece of history and that any new buildings that come in at least maintain that partial facade and the recognition of the history of not only just this state, but of the minority communities that are in it. We sit here having recognized Suicide Prevention Awareness Month at the beginning of this, which I'd recommend 988 versus a 273 talk as someone who knows the number well. It's easier to dial when you're dead inside. And we also have a Black Lives Matter mural right outside. By creating a zoning ordinance that allows for the preservation of history, this city will be able to show that it's not just one of signals of virtue, but of actual virtues.
Next will be Kara Cope, followed by Brad Auger. Kara's here in person.
Hi, I'm Kara Cope. I'm a resident of Salt Lake City. And I have a lot to say. So in my 2 minutes, I'm going to start with, it's very sad when marginalized communities are ignored by the city council and the mayor repeatedly. We have asked for years to keep this building up. I understand it's not in your best interest to keep it up. That being said, you promised a big open space within all of your multi-family units that you want to build along with your boutiques and everything going in there. You said you would give us open space. So I'm here today to ask you, in a city where you claim family is everything, unless you're marginalized or BIPOC, that if you're going to make this open space amongst your mess that you're going to do there on the corner of 3rd West and 8th South, that you leave open space, you rehire the person that made those murals. Have those murals redone in an open space where people can come, rest, get water, get some respite care, maybe not pitch a tent, but get some services. Because in your whole moratorium of closing down shelters and everything that the mayor, our lovely mayor, has done, this is the saddest part of all. You do not care for the people of Salt Lake, nor for the marginalized families, and it shows. So please reach into your tiny little plastic hearts and think about what's best for the community, what we've asked you to do repeatedly, and what we will continue to ask for repeatedly. The murals must stay in one form or another. Hire the same person that did it, make them so they can't be marred up, make an open space, make it family friendly. Do what you're supposed to do and listen to your constituents, especially you. Have a great night.
Next will be Brad Auger, followed by Jesse Plants. Brad, you may now unmute. Okay, it seems that Brad is still having difficulties, so we will move on to Jesse, who is here in person.
I just got here. Thank you for taking my comment. I'm actually here to share a vision I have for the fleet block that I think would be interesting to hear with respect to everyone else's input. What I would like to see happen is to create something that would be an attraction actually for outside people, as well as fitting into the the form that we all want. Some sort of open green space, some sort of open shared space that is interesting. And my vision is an interesting one. The original founders of the city, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, they had originally came up with this idea called the Plat of Zion. Plat of Zion was originally residential and commercial on the outside, green space in the middle. The idea, the reason our blocks are so big, so that every block could be self-sustaining. In their vision, there would be agriculture in the middle, and they would be using that to sustain their block. I like this vision. I think it fits in with modern urban ideas of open green space, of mixed use, of walkable cities. I think it fits into what you're trying to do here. And I believe if you did it correctly, it would actually serve also as a living and breathing museum, some sort of a gem of Salt Lake, you might say, that would display this original vision. And that's basically what I wanted to share today. I have a few drafts that I have made up that I could share if you'd like to see them. I just wanted to share that vision because I do think that it could end up being not only an amazing community gathering space, a place for, taking into account all of the things that that block is being known for, the police brutality, murals, and it has its own character in its own way already.
Right.
But I feel like it should be also maybe an attraction, a living and breathing museum. Thank you.
Next will be Ilana Raskind, who is here in person.
Good evening. My name is Ilana Raskin. Thank you for having me this evening. I don't have much more to add to what's already been said, but I just wanted to reiterate the importance of truly listening to the families of the people who are up on the murals. That should be the number one, first and foremost priority through all of this. The people that I've met through the murals and the work that I've been able to be a part of through the murals represent the very best of Salt Lake City and fill my heart with joy and pride every time I go there and every time I work with these people. And the city's response over and over again, honestly, represents some of the worst of what I've seen in Salt Lake City. It's clear that the families are not being listened to. The issues are always sidestepped, And we've seen over and over again a lack of willingness to truly listen and truly respond to what the families are asking for. We're talking about a rezone. I understand that it's about form rather than use. There are still many possibilities. However, at the end of the day, this constant talk that's not actually about the issues and what the families are actually asking for in terms of creating a space that is filled with resources, with care for our community, is not what's being addressed. And as the city continues to respond in its way, it's signifying that they don't actually care and that they're not actually committed to listening to the families, to respecting what the families are asking for, and to honoring every single person whose face is up there. So I would just ask that the city do better. Thank you.
And that was the final registered commenter.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Brett.
I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second. I have a motion from Councilmember Puya, a second from Councilmember Mono. Any questions on this or discussion on this topic? See none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So that passes unanimously,
Mr.
7-0.
Chair, may I have a point of privilege?
Yes.
Something that I came out to mind when we were listening to the comments is and it reminded me about the dozens of meetings that we had in public about this same issue, and how much, for example, remembering some of the things that Councilmember Mano brought into the table about, let's make sure that this project even impact the developers and the architects, that we are involving minority-owned architects and developers, that we not only one gigantic company will take over this project. That was an idea from Councilmember Mano, from Councilmember Chris Warren, trying to remember some of these things, trying to involve make space for non-profit organizations to come in and take some of these spaces. Councilmember Victoria Petro, to try to make sure that we remember about the victims, to talk about the communities impacted. It's just dozens of meetings about this, and public recorded. You can find them. I can help you find them.
Small business.
Small businesses. Another one that you brought up. Yes. We have talked about income levels on these properties. We have talked about all of this, and we have still lots to learn. We have still lots to evolve and to improve. But this conversation didn't start here, nor is the end of it here. But this city, while we're not perfect, is listening. And I listen so carefully to the administration's work on reaching out to the community, spending hundreds of hours meeting with members of the community and members of the families sometimes too. I remember listening to those reports and having questions here about that. Yet we're never going to find consensus 100% on anything. Let me tell you, I have a neighbor that is asking me for a street light, and I have another neighbor in the same block telling me to take off the street lights. And this is a much more complex of an issue. I don't want to simplify it, but the work done here, while not perfect, is hard. It just like humbles you, because we have done so much to make this project perfect. I just wanted to put that in perspective, because there is a lot that we have done and discussed in public about this, and I hope that we can help you find some of those documents and meetings that are recorded and on the record. And I'm sure I forgot half of it and messed up half of the things I said, but I just wanted to throw that in there after that vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to item B3, a resolution of the Ivory University House Public Benefits Analysis. And before we take in public comments, I will first turn the time over to Allison Rowland, who's online, Council Staff Policy Analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. An organization known as Ivory University House, L3C, is building new student housing at 434 South Mario Capecchi Drive at the University of Utah. At completion, the project will consist of 4 buildings with 465 apartment-style units housing 621 students. The administration performed a public benefit analysis to assess whether the city should waive impact and permit fees, as well as provide refunds for fees the project has already paid. The amount waived or refunded would total just over $2.4 million. In return, over a period of 10 years, Ivory University House would pledge $2.4 million to fund need-based scholarships. These scholarships would be administered by the university and reserved for Salt Lake City students. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Allison. Taylor, please start our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no one registered for this item.
Thank you, Taylor. I will look for a motion. Oh. Please, yes, go ahead.
I appreciate your time. I understood
Go
the
ahead.
staff.
Just repeat your name for everybody for the.
Sure, Annalisa Wilson. I'm here on behalf of Ivory University House L3C. I understood that staff was going to request an additional study session, but just in case that request is not grounded, I wanted to hit just a couple items. One, it seemed like there were some questions in the last study session about the entity structure, and given the dollars involved, I want to be completely transparent about what that is. In the packet I provided the definition of an L3C, and you'll see in that an L3C, just like a nonprofit, is required to have a charitable purpose. Unfortunately, an L3C does not have the benefit of being tax exempt, so why would we ever pick this entity when we have all the burdens and none of the benefits? And really the only reason is so that Ivory Commercial could build this building. And by building this building at cost without charging any developer fee, it allowed this project to save over $7.5 million. And all of that dollar for dollar will be applied to student scholarships. That is the only reason we're all dealing with this wonky structure. I also want to be completely transparent that there is only one owner of Ivory University House L3C, and that's a trust. That's the Ivory University House Trust. And the only beneficiary of that trust is a 501c3 called the Clark and Christine Ivory Foundation. So I just wanted to be clear with the council that no individual or for-profit entity would be receiving any benefit from this waiver. And then finally, I think the last point I just want to hit quickly is if you look on the third slide, we did do an impact analysis. By waiving these funds, that does not mean the city will incur these funds. In fact, our position is there will be zero impact on the city. We have studies that show university students do not use Salt Lake City parks, and that's 1.6 million of the fee. And for the rest, as you'll see, we have a contract with the University of Utah to provide police support. We will not increase impacts on the roads, and the state-of-the-art building will have its own fire suppression. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commenters on the Ivory? All right, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer item to a future date for action.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Puy, a second from Councilmember Valdemoros. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Moving on to item B4, an ordinance budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2023 to 24. Before taking comments, I'll turn the time over to Ben Lutke, Council Staff Policy Analyst.
There are 10 proposed items in budget amendment number 1, which have a total expenditure of over $14 million. Some of the largest items include a $14 million reappropriation for new vehicles because manufacturers were not accepting orders when the funding was originally approved, but the vehicles are still needed. $6.3 million as local matching funds to a federal grant for rebuilding bridges over the Jordan River, and $1.5 million for additional funding to reconstruct 2100 South through the Sugarhouse Business District. The staff report and the administration's proposal for the 10 items are available in today's meeting packet. The council's budget webpage is updated throughout the year with each budget amendment, and it's available at tinyurl.com/SLCFY24. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Taylor, our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is one person registered to speak to this item. That will be Dave Iltis. Dave, you may now unmute.
Hi. Let's see. So On 2100 South, not to debate all the back and forths about the project there, but there's some details that I met with transportation about that would be really nice to see, like better crossing at 9th East, some other better crossings on this. And I hope that you will provide enough funding in here so that transportation's hands aren't tied and there's a little bit of leeway in the budget to do some of the nicer things and add some things like this. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say on that, is just make sure there's enough money so that they're not stuck with not the greatest outcome for this project. So that's it. Thank you.
That was the final registered commenter.
Thank you, Taylor. I will look for a motion. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, do you ask for a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer the item to a future date for action.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Baldamoros, a second from Councilmember Petro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passes 7-0 unanimously. Moving on to item number.
Mr. Chair, can I just clarify something quickly about the inclusion of item A3 that was said during the work session, that we're including that? Jennifer, can you repeat? Do you know which part I'm talking about? Sorry that you just walked in.
Yeah, sorry. Which item?
Item A3, the impact fees for the Ivory House.
I think you guys closed the hearing and referred action to a future date. Typically what that would mean is it would be on a formal meeting for the council to consider taking action.
But it's also on our budget amendment.
Right. So, and we talked about this during the budget amendment work session earlier.
Yeah, so just
it's
repeat
to
that.
clarify. So it will not be included in the budget amendment unless you approve the public benefits analysis. So staff will automatically adjust the budget amendment according to the action you take on the public benefits analysis.
Right. So to say it another way, like we're including it so that option
Preserves options.
Preserves the option. This is not the final vote on that line item.
Yes, that's accurate.
Thank you.
And if we vote no on the public benefits analysis, there's no additional step needed to undo this in the budget amendment.
I think what, and staff has been brainstorming it, is that it's a little unusual that it's on the same date, and the administration transmitted it this way just to preserve options, like you said. So what we'll likely do is confirm it on the motion sheet, that consistent with your action earlier in the evening. The same is true for the consolidated fee schedule item. Hypothetically, if you did not approve those consolidated fee schedule changes, we'd remove that from the budget.
Thanks.
Thank you I just wanted to state that for anybody that wasn't here for the work session. Thanks.
Thank you very much for both that. Appreciate that. So we're moving on to item number B5 regarding an ordinance amendments to Salt Lake City consolidated fee schedule for fiscal year 2023 to 24. Before taking the comments, I'm going to turn the time over back to Ben, council staff policy analyst.
All fees charged by the city are shown on the consolidated fee schedule, along with the authorizing law. This amendment is to separate out different fees for closing a vehicle travel lane versus closing a portion of the sidewalk. The adopted version of the consolidated fee schedule inadvertently listed the same amount for closing a sidewalk as for closing a vehicle travel lane. They should be separate amounts. This amendment will correct and separate the two fees. That's it.
Thank you, Ben. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is one person registered to speak to this item. That will be Dave Iltis. Dave, you may now unmute.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with separating the fees for closing a sidewalk or closing a lane of traffic. However, Salt Lake City has a really bad problem throughout the city of contractors continually violating and not providing space for pedestrians to walk, to closing off or putting signs in the middle of bike lanes, to, for example, on 300 North, parking in the bike lanes where there's a construction project, or 1300 East, where there's continually signs placed in the middle of the bike lane leading to unsafe conditions. There are countless numbers of problems downtown where sidewalks get closed with no alternative, no place for people with disabilities, no place to walk safely. And while this isn't necessarily for this particular council item, I've talked with transportation. They don't really know what to do. And yet it continues to be a problem. And we as citizens are told to talk with enforcement, but nothing happens there. And so can the council please act upon this so that if the fee is for closing a sidewalk, that perhaps it's tripled or quadrupled if they don't do the right thing. And same goes for lane closures, because the contractors have basically run amok, and there's no real good oversight. There's no good enforcement mechanism, and the permitting process there is completely broken. And this ultimately hurts people on foot and people on bikes. Thank you.
That was the final register comment there.
Thank you, Taylor. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt an ordinance amending consolidated fee schedule for fiscal year 2024 related to lane and sidewalk closure fees.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Mono, second from Councilmember Pui. Any discussion on this item? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item C, potential action items. Brings us item C1 regarding an ordinance of 1782 South, 1600 East zoning map and master plan amendment. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass. So just for the public's understanding, we will get to the motion on the ordinance, but we're considering some legislative action language first. So first, I move that we pass a legislative action requesting staff study a zoning text amendment which would consider amending all R1 single-family zones. The study should include but not be limited to the following possible changes: consolidating of R1 5,000, 7,000, and 12,000 into one zone, reducing the minimum lot size, removing or reducing minimum frontage, easing flag lot standards, and allowing single-family attached housing in all zones. I further move that we initiate a separate study to consider zoning map amendments along collector and arterial roads to allow greater residential density and mixed-use developments.
And we just also for the public, there's a couple of motions in work at this time. We'll go through those and then we'll come back to the motion on the actual rezoning. So I have a motion from Councilmember Mono, which is an optional legislative action moving forward. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
A motion from Councilmember Mono, a second from Councilmember Petro. Any discussions on this item? I'll just say that I have a motion at the end of this, basically, and Councilmember Valamoros has the next one, making additional legislative intent to the same broad category. So on this item here, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Oh, aye, but can I have a moment of personal privilege?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak to the legislative intent that we just adopted on two things. Two things I want to note, especially for residents in District 3, that this is our recommended changes that would be to certain areas in the city, but that the historic districts that still exist, those are on top of the existing zoning, so those would continue to be the same that they are. So there was no need to include that in this motion because it doesn't change the historic districts. I also want to speak to constituents that might be listening that have asked me, what is the council's strategy and philosophy about adding density? Because they've been listening to our discussions, they've been following us, and that's a question that I've gotten frequently. The majority of residents recognize that we need more housing and that we're running out of land on which to build it. I also think that most Salt Lake City residents recognize that the situation that we're in now is the result of historic inequities, and they want the council or they want their city government to help right those wrongs. I don't think it's what we've been doing is the best way for us to achieve those ends, to approve things on a case-by-case basis. I think we need a broader perspective and a more transparent, organized process. If we're going to tackle this issue, then let's do it in a way that actually creates an equitable outcome, because that's, I think, what I'm hearing in all of these conversations. I ask that every constituent, especially anyone that's listening from District 3, to engage with us thoughtfully in our discussions that are coming up along the way about these necessary changes and in adding density. So thank you to Councilmember Mono for suggesting this legislative intent, and I'm glad to support it on that basis. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Sorry, could we get some clarification on the vote, please? We couldn't determine if it was a unanimous.
I didn't vote, so I'm a yes.
I don't
Thank
I
you.
don't think we did finish up voting.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't vote.
Oh, I thought we did. Sorry.
Okay, so
Sorry.
all in favor of this legislative this motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. That was first from Councilman Wharton. Councilmember Baltimore, do you have a comment? I have a comment.
Yeah.
I was
also
going
have a
to clarify the vote.
I also have a comment.
I'll have a comment at the end.
Okay. Yes. So I understand the desires of this study, and I kind of echo what Councilmember Wharton was also saying here, that I understand the desires of this, but I feel that a deeper discussion of the scope of the study is necessary prior to launching it. Growth and increased density deserves a thoughtful and thorough discussion, because I'm concerned with the impact of growth and density on our air quality if the result is more vehicles on the streets. Housing density requires nearby grocery stores, daycares, local establishments to take the car off the street and establishing affordable living. I'm also concerned with our water if our usage is not addressed. The Great Salt Lake is 10 feet lower than what than I would call a healthy level. Even after an incredible year, it's still 10 feet lower. And I'm concerned that the infrastructure costs associated with growth and how that's going to impact the city. So, and these concerns, back to Councilmember Wharton's point, is not just District 3 or District 6. It's not specific to one district, but in the entire city. And I have just a couple suggestions, but I'm going to make that motion at the end here. So that's just my point of personal privilege. Thank you.
We're moving on to motion 2. And this is my suggestion, that I move that the city collaborate with the county to get a better understanding of how city and county ordinances interact pertaining to lot subdivision processes, and update ordinances if needed to make sure both are consistent. And I further move that we ask the administration to identify residential properties that are non-conforming lots within the city and create a streamlined process to legalize them, and recommend to the council budgetary needs if a third party is needed to help accomplish this.
I have a motion from Councilmember Valdemoros. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion from Councilmember Valdemoros, a second from Councilmember Mono. All in favor? Oh, excuse me, any discussion on this item?
Can we, I know this might be nitpicky, but it's become really apparent tonight and today in discussions that our zoning in general is not keeping up and is actually holding us back in a lot of cases from doing what needs to be done for the city. Our constituents, particularly on the border that Councilmember Pui and I share, are so tired of lot by lot rezones. Can we put a caveat in here that says if this takes too much energy away and it would just be better as part of a citywide rezone or a recomprehension of zoning, what I don't want to do is spend 18 months doing this only to get 18 months down the road and go, well, we should have done this as part of a larger project and allocated any funding, consulting towards this larger project. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not that I don't want this done. I just don't want it prioritized if it's a better use of our energy and resources to be more comprehensive in addressing zoning issues.
Sorry, can I respond to that? That's fine with me, but then we have to say today that we're going to allocate funding for the citywide rezone study, because until we get there, as we come back with this, these non-conforming lots exist today. They've existed for a long time. It's always an issue. It pits the neighborhoods against neighbor about, can I build one more house? Can I not? The planning staff is scrambling. The Board of Adjustment, look at how many resources it's taken. I know from experience in the planning division, we spend so much time in this. So all I'm asking with my motion is, let's talk to the county, which people can go to the county and just, divide a property without telling us. And all of a sudden, a new property owner has 3 lots or whatever. And then let's have an MOU with them to say, hey, how can we make this stop? Or come up with a solution so that we don't create more work for our planning staff. And 2, I know we have so many, so can we just get that over with and not have to deal with these non-conforming lots?
If we can, I suspect it's, if we start pulling this thread, others are going to start coming with it. And I just don't want us to narrow down and give undue attention to this when we should be more comprehensive. So as long as that's flagged somewhere in our consciousness and comprehension as we're moving along, that if we start pulling on this thread and others start coming with it, that it might be time for us to start thinking more globally about how to handle this. I'd like us to stay open to that.
That's my word.
I am not inclined to support this as currently written, and I just want to explain why, because we talked earlier. I think it's probably a good idea for us to coordinate with the county and gain a better understanding of how these kind of situations get created. But I just disagree that, like with the concept that and I'm sorry if I'm like lawyering this, but like to say that we're legalizing them, like they are currently legal. They're just the people that have them, I guess, want to change what the law is that applies, and that to me is just the same side. Is just the other side of the same coin. So I support the first part. The second part I don't, and so for that reason I'm voting against it. But to be clear, that's why.
No.
Okay.
Good points.
So.
But what I know is that in a few months, another lot like this will come our way, and we're going to spend another, 10, 15 staff working on something like this when we could just like move forward and get some of these things cleaned up.
Mr. Chair, very quickly, is there a language change on this that will get to sort of the intention of what Councilmember Valdemoros wants to get to?
So do you have a friendly change?
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you. I think the first part is fine, and I think saying that, for me, what what Councilmember Petro said is sort of answers the second part. What we're going to ask for is a more holistic view, and hopefully most of these lots will be captured within that view. And so to me, that kind of solves the second part, especially if we, the second paragraph, especially if we include the first paragraph, which instructs staff as part of the process in motion 1 to also coordinate with the county to make sure that we're preventing this from continuing to happen, or better understanding how we got to where we are, and incorporate that into the same study rather than have a separate competing directive.
So
that
what
makes sense?
can you
Okay.
clarify? So clarify your friendly, just see.
Sorry, yes. So my friendly amendment would be just to strike the second the second paragraph and to just vote on the first.
So scratch the paragraph that says, I further move that we ask the administration to identify residential properties
Correct.
that are non-conforming.
Correct.
Okay.
But
So
is that, but I don't know. if
Yes,
that's
as long as it's back into the motion one, like it's understood and it's in the record that we're hoping that with this study we'll solve this non-conforming lots.
Okay, so I have a friendly motion from Councilmember Morton. Do I have a second for that friendly motion? Do we need a second for that friendly motion?
I second.
Okay, I have a second for that friendly. Councilmember Mono, all in favor of the friendly amendment from Councilmember Morton?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you.
None opposed. That motion passes unanimously.
Thanks. So,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that was a vote on the amendment.
Yes.
And so the original motion.
We still have to pass. Oh,
Correct.
okay.
You still have a motion on the table for the original, with the amendment
But
included.
it was a friendly amendment that was accepted.
Yeah, it was accepted. Yeah. We're good.
Okay.
We're good then. Yeah. Okay. The third motion, and this kind of goes to Councilmember Pito's comment there earlier, that this is a complex discussion and item, and it requires some thorough and thoughtful discussion across the board, not just from the council members, but also from the community, and making sure we have a good dialogue here. So my motion is that I move that we include in this legislative actions that we're talking about here in the last two motions, that the council will hold a work session with the administration on the scope of the study, so we really understand what we're actually trying to do here, aligning with Thriving in Place, alignment with the future land water policies, alignment with our public transportation needs, and our vision of a walkable city. So that's my motion. I will look for a second.
Second.
It's weird that I'm making a motion. Yeah. So that's my motion. Councilman Dugan motion, second from Councilman Valdemorse. Any discussion on this item?
You have some thoughts about this. I have some thoughts about this, Mr. Chair. I obviously I don't disagree with what you're trying to get to this here, which is let's make sure that this study sort of aligns with all these other parts of this that we're studying, all of these other Thriving in Place, and make sure that we don't work with that we are not displacing, and that we are understanding the forces of displacement and gentrification. I'm a little concerned about the future land and water policy, because we don't have, the city doesn't own these studies, and we're not currently, as far as I understand, spearheading studies within the city that gives us direction about what this means. And I also have a little confusion about what you meant by public transportation needs. I mean, as you know, I've been pushing on transportation since with you and with many of us together. But we don't own the public transportation, and the UTA and the legislature would tell you that it's the chicken or the egg first, right? Do you need the demand? Hence, we are paying ourselves with city funds for bus lines to go into the west side, and only on the west side, but to the west side, because the UTA will not fund them themselves. So I'm a little confused about how these caveats might actually be in detriment to the general study, which is let's study the general picture first. I'm okay supporting the alignment with Thriving in Place and our vision of walkable city, because I do agree with those, and not that I disagree with the water issues and land issues and public transportation, but I also don't think that we have studies that I could refer to that.
Very good point. And my thought was that this is a study. I just want to make sure that when we're looking at this study, we're taking a holistic look on the impact, because if we're going to be a walkable city, then we need to look at the public transportation. If we're going to be a walkable city, we need to look at our water policy. Yeah. That was the vision of there. It wasn't that we have a policy, but we need to look at it the whole picture here, because they all play a part with each other.
Yeah,
that was my intent of that
word. I see what you mean now.
So I think maybe the word alignment is the incorrect word.
Okay. When you, yeah, I think I understand what you mean. And when you're talking about water policy, right? Single-family homes use more water than a building, right?
Absolutely,
So
right.
just if we base it on use of water, let's densify all single-family homes.
Right, and that's also about the whole type, like the idea of growth, right? We're growing as a city, but our water's really not growing. So how do we make sure that those things are aligned? And then the same thing with the infrastructure. How do we make sure that we're not growing so much and then holy cow, our infrastructure can't handle it and it's going to cost us more money, or the water use. So that's why I'm looking at the holistic part there.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I put the alignment, and you're right, we don't have a water policy. So are you asking for a change in the wording, or should we just?
I have a comment to the motion. I think all of these things are important for us to consider with any changes we make. I'm going to vote no on this because I don't want to have. I'm always happy to have a work session and discuss zoning issues. That's my number one issue. But the original motion that we passed is just asking staff to begin studying that. So at some point we can have a work session to discuss that. And at that point, I think we're going to naturally look at all four of those things. And it's not. I don't know of another time when we have done a work session before we have any information from staff. So for me, I would want to wait until staff can study this out, bring it to us, and then we can consider those things within that. I would be okay with language that says that, just as Councilmember Valdemorris asked, that we add the issues pertaining to the subdivision process and non-conforming lots. I would be okay adding into that we ask staff to consider those four things as they do their study to bring to us what could be a potential ordinance change, or maybe not. Maybe they come to us and say, we're not going to recommend anything. That's also a possible outcome of this. So I would be okay adding language that says, staff, please consider these as you're studying, but I'm not sure that I'm ready to have a work session to tell staff what to do on an issue that we haven't given them any time to study yet.
So maybe it's something like a small group meetings versus a work session on that.
I think we need to give staff time to study it before. I mean, any land use decision has to go through the whole process of staff studies it, gives a recommendation, it's engaged with the community. The planning commission has an open public comment period. They make a recommendation, and then we do the same thing with our open public comment period, public hearing and recommendation. And so I don't know. I would like to have this go through the same process as every other land use decision, and for us to have a work session before to tell staff what the outcome needs to be would be counter to that process. That's our tradition and set out in state law.
Okay. Will you I think it feels to me like Councilmember Mano, I don't know, maybe I understood this right, but you will consider.
I would consider adding those as priorities that we ask staff to do as they're studying this, but I'm not sure the part about having a work session to tell them to look at those things is necessary. I think we just tell them right now to look at those things. And when they've done their study, they come back with that information.
So the motion would be more that I move that we include this language down here, these items 1 through 4.
To consider.
I'll make a friendly amendment.
Yes.
I'll suggest a friendly amendment to the motion. The amendment would be that the motion reads, I move that we include in the legislative action that the staff consider the following 4 things as they conduct their study: thriving in place, future land and water policy, public transportation, and walkable communities.
I second that.
So a friendly amendment from Councilmember Mano.
Well, you have to accept the amendment.
I accept it. Sorry, right. Yes, I accept it.
Then I second it.
And you second it. Right. So Councilmember Mano made the motion. Councilmember Bui seconded. Any discussion on this friendly?
I'd like to hear from Councilmember Young. I'm just kidding.
So, all in favor of that friendly to the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? That passes unanimously.
Chair. I move that the council reject the ordinance.
Second. Motion from Councilmember Young. Second.
Second.
A motion from Councilmember Young, a second from Councilmember Warden. Any discussion on this item? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
That passes 6-1.
No.
And
It passes unanimously. To reject. So you didn't hear me.
I thought you said no.
No, I agree with you guys.
Okay,
to
that passes,
reject
sorry,
the
that passes
ordinance.
unanimously,
Yeah,
7-0.
I said it afterwards, sorry.
Gotcha. I believe
Wow.
that. Thank you very much from the council and the staff and the city for allowing us that discussion on this one motion. As you can see, zoning and the city is dear to our hearts, and it's important that we have some great communication and great dialogue across the city on all things. So
more, Mr. Chair.
appreciate that very much.
Could I take a short point of personal privilege? I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for engaging on this issue. It is a very weird, strange request that was brought to us, but it has implications for the entire city. And I don't know that there were very many council members that were on the same page, and for us to find some level of consensus on be able to pass something that we agree, I feel like is a really big step. So thank you, specifically Councilmember Wharton, who I think you and I were on maybe the opposite ends of this issue to begin with, and it was a conversation with you that got us to find something that we overlapped on and were able to work together on. So thank you for having that conversation and for being willing to work with me on this issue.
Thank you. Happy to.
So we're moving on to item C2 regarding an ordinance, Sugarhouse drive-through text amendment. I'll look for a motion.
I move that the council adopt the ordinance prohibiting all new drive-through facilities in the Sugarhouse business districts CSHBD1 and CSHBD2.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Petro, second from Councilmember Young. Any discussion on this item?
I'd like to point out, thank you to the Sugarhouse constituents who showed up, and particularly to the one who pointed out to us as we were wrestling with banks and pharmacies that if you have a car, driving outside of the bounds of the business district is not difficult for you. And since you all are already living under extreme stress, and those of us who visit you are living under stress, that while we do want to be comprehensive, we've already seen that businesses pivot well during pandemics and during crises, and we can pivot. But for normal operating sanity, we need to save you guys from any further drive-throughs.
Thank you very much for that comment. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, 7-0. This is moving on to item D, comments. Questions to the mayor for the city council? Mayor, so good to see you tonight. Questions for the mayor? You're off the hook, Mayor. All right, we're moving on to item D2, comments to the city council. And we are now at the general comment portion of our meeting. And as a reminder for those joining on Zoom, Isak Canedo from our staff will moderate our Zoom and will message you with any questions about your registration. Staff is handling many tasks, so please limit messages to technical issues and minimal informational updates. If you do need to speak with our staff, please select Isak Canedo from our list of participants. If you need to, please raise your hand in Zoom to indicate that you need something from the host. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling those who wish to comment based on the order of registration or received comment cards. She will call 4 names at a time, and if you're in person, please make sure you come back to room 326, this room, to make your comments. If you're on Zoom, please unmute your mic when Taylor calls your name. That's
Chair,
2.
before she begins calling, can I have a point of personal privilege, please?
Sure. You get 2 minutes. I'll mute your mic.
I suspect many of you are here for the North Point Small Area Plan, and thank you for being here for it. I just want to make sure you are all aware of the work that was done during work session in an effort to make sure that our dialogue is as productive as possible. During the work session, I was pleased to present the requests that centered the constituents who live out there, which means that we are seeking a comprehensive ag zoning throughout anything that is eligible for rezoning. Things that are already entitled, like the business park on the Skinnell property that is currently home to a 1 million square foot warehouse.
that's not up for grabs, but anything that is up for grabs will be zoned ag in an effort to buy the city more time. There is no intention to create a warehouse district, nor was there ever. The grasp at M1 was an attempt to avoid the horrors that have resulted from Business Park, which is currently what my neighbors and friends who live out there are dealing with, which is a 1 million square foot warehouse that blocks their view of sunsets, impedes every aspect of their life, and is causing a development scenario that is causing light pollution, sound pollution, and air pollution in their lives to the point that their physical and mental health is now being imperiled. And so as we're asking for ag, what would happen is that we would give planning department more time to come up with a zone that actually reflects what we want to see out there, which would not be warehouses, but would be some sort of flex space hybrid, which was presented to them in a setting, and potentially some sort of low density residential that conforms to county standards of residential, which would be no more than 4 units per acre, with a clustering options to promote conservation easements around the waterways in particular. The plan is the direct result of me and staff engaging directly with the constituents who live there. It is at their direction that I have presented it and that I've asked my co-counselors to suggest it. And so as you're making your comments, I just wanted to make sure that you had the time and opportunity to use your words in 2 minutes most effectively and not ask us to not do a warehouse district, which is already off the table. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Councilman Petro. Back to the agenda items here. It's 2 minutes is a 2-minute timer. If you're unable to finish your comments, you can send us the rest of your comments or your full comments via email, mail, or call us our office. And also, just the rules of decorum are taking effect. Please be respectful while sharing your comments, because the council also respects all points of view and welcomes new insights. So I will now turn the time over to Taylor for our first commenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First will be Matthew Young, followed by Haley Ashton, and then Brian Mensch. Matthew is here in person.
Hello. So I am deaf and I'm using sign language. I want to urge you to hold a public meeting in District 1 regarding the parking strip ordinance. I don't think that residents should be required to have vegetation in their parking strips. We should save water as we live in a desert. And watering vegetation is a waste of money. I also oppose parking strips being required to have a tree planted. Trees have deep roots and they break through the sidewalks, curbs, driveways, water lines, gas lines. If the city requires trees, the city will be responsible for damage, repairs caused by the trees. Please hold a public meeting. And how will we know when the meeting is scheduled? Thank you.
Next will be.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just wanted to clarify for others in the audience that we're normally given 2 minutes, but ADA laws, accommodations allow him up to 4 minutes. So thank you very much.
Next will be Haley Ashton, followed by Brian Mensch, and then Courtney Henley.
Taylor, I guess he has more to say. Is that correct? Okay.
Oh.
And so we'll start that timer over again.
Sorry.
So thank you. No, 2 minutes is fine. Sorry for the confusion.
So an opposite ordinance would require the tree roots that could break driveways and sidewalks. And could cause accidents. And that would block views for traffic and the inability to look left and right on the street. This could cause damage to other vehicles. So please, I want to be able to leave my property and house alone and not be required to have that tree and not required to water that tree. I don't want the trees near the cement and away from the yards. And that's everything. Thank you. And thank you. And thanks, Sophia, for helping schedule the interpreters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for the interpreters and make it known to the public that we want everyone's comment. So if you need accommodations to speak to us, please let us know.
Thank you. Taylor, our next commenter.
Next is Haley Ashton, followed by Brian Mensch, and then Courtney Henley. Haley, you may now unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I didn't attend. I watched the work session today, and I really appreciate the honesty and the passion with which the North Point master plan was discussed. There seemed to emerge a little bit of a false dichotomy in the discussion that was kind of concerning, pitting people against the environment. And I just like to remind the city of our interconnectedness of, interconnection of generations and species and resources. And, as our city grows, whether we want it to or not, it's happening. The city might consider looking to a recent World Economic Forum Insight Report, January 2022, that maps a path for growing cities to transform their relationships to nature, to becoming biodiverse cities by 2023. And these would be cities that are sustainable and strive to meet the needs of all of its citizens. And this is something I'd be happy to email you. In fact, I already have, so look forward to reading it in your email. So just a reminder of our interconnectedness. And I thank you for all your work.
Next is Brian Mensch, followed by Courtney Henley, and then Katie Pappas. Brian, you may now unmute.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brian Mensch, president of Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, and I am just modifying my comments based on what we just learned about what happened at the work session. The issue of the North Point Master Plan is intimately connected to the issue of whether or not the Great Salt Lake disappears or whether or not this valley becomes a pollution nightmare. The shrinking of the Great Salt Lake has prompted multiple national and international stories in the last year, all of which amounted to a significant negative PR campaign for the city and the state for not doing enough to save the lake. The author of the largest piece in the New York Times said, quote, "Utahns may have to leave if the lake disappears." This is the most important environmental and public health issue in the state's history, and it will define our future. Beginning tomorrow, there will be another round of national stories about a new chapter on this issue, another round of bad PR for Salt Lake City and the state for not taking any real action to save the lake. The North Point Master Plan, if done incorrectly, will be opening the door and welcoming in further demise of the lake by industrializing and paving over more and more of its wetlands, inviting more and more sources of water consumption, and ushering in truckloads, literally, of pollution to add to the existing mix of winter inversions, wildfire smoke, high ozone, and Great Salt Lake dust pollution that we already experience. It is contrary to the image and the reputation of Salt Lake City as an oasis of sensible, progressive, enlightened public policy in an otherwise deep red, ideologically driven state. No one wants Salt Lake City in 2040 to look like Pittsburgh of 1940. Industrializing the North Point will create a dark, dirty, and ugly place to live. We are all clearly reaching a breaking point where all the things we depend on for a decent quality of life on the Wasatch Front could be sacrificed on the altar of developer profiteering. Thank you.
Next will be Courtney Henley, followed by Katie Pappas, and then Mary Paul. Courtney is here in person.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to hold this because I'm kind of tall. Thank you, Councilwoman Petro. Awesome, giving us that tingly feeling at the council. Really appreciate it. I had the opportunity to hear Ben Abbott, Professor Abbott, speak last week, and I strongly encourage everyone to listen to him. He has a PhD in saline lake ecology, and Brian alluded to, he gave Great Salt Lake a death sentence, and we got some water this year. Maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's 6 or 7, and his advice is we all need to do everything that we can to save her. And tonight for me, that's coming here and watching this great council at work, hubby and kids making their own dinner, who knows. For the council, I feel like it's agging this zone. That's great. Is there a wetland zone? I'm ignorant. I don't know, but that's what we need right now, it seems like, around the Great Salt Lake. I'm going to use the rest of my time to quote the wonderful Terry Tempest Williams. We place our faith in our collective capacity to mobilize now. If we can shift our view of Great Salt Lake from a lake to be avoided to a lake to be cherished, from a body of wasted water to the ancient body of wisdom, not to exploit, but to honor and respect as a sovereign body, our relationship and actions for the best will be transformative. Let's transform our city and Great Salt Lake. Thank you so much.
And next will be Katie Pappas, followed by Mary Paul, and then Tussie King. Katie is here in person.
Thank you, Katie, and also please hold your applause until you're outside the building. Thank you.
My name is Katie Pappas, and I live in District 3. I oppose the North Point Small Area Plan as it is currently written. It promotes more construction in a unique rural area with 60 households and important wetland and wildlife habitat. This was never the right place for this type of development. A trip to the Inland Port area confirms there is already warehouse construction far exceeding the actual need. I agree with the mayor that North Point is unique and planning must be sensitive to the rural nature of the area. The best way to achieve that is to leave the area zoned agricultural as it currently is. M1 zoning is far too broad. It impedes the city's ability to guide appropriate development for individual areas. A new zoning category is needed. The mayor and council should speed up the transfer of development rights ordinance process to move high-impact development to more appropriate areas. The Great Salt Lake Shoreline Heritage Preservation Plan should be prioritized over further development. You can always build something, but there are few opportunities to set aside and preserve natural areas for the future. This is not choosing between helping people or the natural environment. We are all part of the same. More attention needs to be paid to the impacts of ongoing construction on the health and well-being of residents. Construction is no longer a temporary inconvenience. It is an ongoing nightmare, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for North Point residents. Efforts must be made to mitigate damage and lessen impacts. The situation there would be better for residents if 2900 West had been constructed prior to allowing development. Please take the time and care needed to do this right. Thank you.
Next will be Mary Paul, followed by Tessie King, and then Marcia Walk. Mary, you may now unmute.
Hi, my name is Mary Paul. Just trying to wrap my head around the change of updates, and I agree with the previous commenters. Hooray, hooray for at least the ag designation. Very much appreciated. Like you said, it buys time, but ultimately it's the wrong designation, because even with agricultural development, that could still have, horrific downstream environmental effects on this very precious area. And if anything, the past several years that we've been through with drought and then an onslaught of beautiful, wonderful rain and snow has taught us the critical importance of exactly what the Great Salt Lake does for our air quality and our water supply. And it is not a critical resource to be toyed with. Our very survival is at stake. There's video footage of existing dust from the trucks in the area, and it's already jaw-dropping. As a mom of kiddos with allergies and asthma, my heart goes out to every single one of those residents right now. This is not okay. This is not what they signed up for. And I actually used to go duck hunting out there with my dad as a kid, and it was literally the most beautiful place in the world in my mind's eye, and that deserves to be preserved and continued on for all of the species, for all of the ecosystems, for all of the people. I really appreciate listening to this meeting and the care and the concern that you have expressed for these other developments, and that you want to take the long, broad view and do things right. Please, this is an urgent matter. I urge you to consider an emergency zoning, if possible, an allocation of some sorts that will buy us the proper time and absolutely halt everything. We cannot mess this up. It is our survival. Thank you.
Next will be Tessie King, followed by Marcia Walk, and then Stan Holmes. Mary, you may now unmute.
I'm sorry, did you say Mary?
Yes.
That was me. I just spoke.
Sorry, next will be Tessie. Tessie, you may now unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, okay, great. So my name is Tessie King. I live in District 7. And I just have a whole lot of questions. First of all, what is the development that we are looking at? Are we looking at, apparently a business park is now on the table. What types of jobs? I kind of have this feeling that we're having a discussion between helping people who need jobs and pitting that, like one of the speakers mentioned, against environmental concerns. And I'm curious about why we have come to the point where we're even pitting those two things against one another. I'm very much for helping people get better jobs. But I'm also very much about keeping our environment, especially at this time when we are in the midst of climate change. And I just don't quite understand how we can possibly look at the Great Salt Lake and say, well, it'll be here. It's fine. It's been here for centuries, and we're in a climate. We're in the midst of the climate crisis. So I just don't think that this is the time for us to mess around with the wetlands to create more pollution with more development. It seems like there are plenty of warehouses throughout the Salt Lake Valley that sit vacant. And if I know Councilwoman Petro Eschler says this isn't a warehouse development. How do we know that an agri is going to be? I just, I am not a developer, so I don't even know what ag means, to be honest with you. I'm like, whatever. So please think about it and do what is right for our environment. Thank you.
Next is Marcia Walk, followed by Stan Holmes, and then Jan Ellen Burton. Marcia, you may now unmute.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Marcia Walk. I live in Salt Lake. I have grandchildren in the North Point community, and I want to talk about a public health catastrophe. And it's going to happen. Let's not make the mistake that was made with the Utah State Prison. It was forced through by the legislature. To date, it's only 12 miles from North Point, the Utah State Prison. They went ahead and built it on mosquito-infested land, which they knew about, and I guess they figured it would be just fixed. Well, it's not fixed, and it's worse than ever. It was $1 billion, which was double the amount taxpayers planned on. It was 2 years late. And now what's happening is 12 miles from North Point, they have West Nile virus. They have also had cases reported at the prison. There have been cases in Syracuse. The dead birds that are being found along the borders of the north part of the Great Salt Lake probably have West Nile virus. This targets our babies and our children. And as far as I'm concerned, you've got little tiny coffins on one hand, and you've got stopping development and protecting the Great Salt Lake. West Nile virus, there's only 5 mosquito repellents that are okayed by the CDC, and they all cause birth defects. They all cause birth defects. And the prison population is concentrated. Once you put trucks and workers and more people out in industrial environments, the West Nile virus is going to go everywhere.
Next will be Stan Holmes, followed by Jan Ellen Burton, and then Lauren Griffith. Stan is here in person.
Good evening. Stan Holmes, Salt Lake City District 3, and my comment has to do with water conservation. Thank you for working with Salt Lake City Public Utilities on the Saving My Water 4 campaign. City residents should be encouraged to conserve water. Currently, though, hundreds of city residents could face a fine of $25 per day and legal action for xeriscaping their park strips. That's under a flawed city landscape ordinance 21A.48, and it's still flawed revision that the city planners are sending your way for approval. Today, I've brought you copies of the first set of petition signatures from residents across all 7 city districts who are calling foul on the current ordinance and on its pending revision. Our petition reads, "We, the undersigned residents of Salt Lake City, urge our City Council to reject the Planning Division's proposed revision of Landscape Ordinance 21A.48 that would require us to plant and water trees in our park strips and maintain at least 33% vegetation in park strips and yards. During this period of unprecedented growth and extended drought, the city should prioritize water conservation. Residents who take water-saving initiatives at their own expense should be praised, not penalized, as the proposed zoning revision would do. Please reject the proposed 21A.48 revision and direct city planners to draft a proposal that prioritizes water conservation, better aligns with the urban forestry plan, and incorporates input from widely noticed public hearings in all 7 districts. Thank you," end quote. I encourage you to work with the Planning Division and Planning Commission as you have with public utilities. You might also ask civil enforcement and the city attorney to estimate how much their budgets may have to be increased if the current or revised ordinance is enforced.
Stan, thank you.
And I'll give these to council member.
Staff will get them
I'll
right
give it
here.
to you. These are copies for each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Next will be Jan Ellen Burton, followed by Lauren Griffith, and then Denise Payne. Jan is here in person.
Thank you. I am Jan Ellen Burton, and I live in District 6. And I was somewhat confused to hear that the North Point project is somewhat halted after today's meeting, because that wasn't my impression. And last winter, I thought perhaps that would happen because I attended the public hearing, and it was decided that a final decision regarding zoning would be made by Salt Lake City after more extensive planning. But I don't know of any extensive planning that's been done so far, and in the meantime, it appears the warehouses have proliferated. I don't know how much storage is necessary for Salt Lake City and its environ, but I do know much of the current buildup of warehouses remains unoccupied. I would think that maybe 90% or so of the current warehouse space should be occupied before making another building. Meanwhile, the people living along North Point route, as has been said, are suffering greatly. Pollution will certainly increase if the region becomes more industrialized. There will be many trucks carrying goods. The pollution will help to shrink the Great Salt Lake, and the small amounts of money the legislature and other sources have contributed to save the lake will be wasted. Birds and wildlife will be affected, as the Great Salt Lake is the largest flyway in the Western Hemisphere. The Salt Lake City want to be known for bringing down an ecosystem. One frequently stated argument for building more warehouses is we need more high-paying jobs. Well, warehouses are not high-paying. Salaries hover around the poverty line. Residents in Salt Lake Valley are already experiencing a reduction in their lifespan caused by pollution. This is a greater problem, of course, for the West Side residents, but the problem is so pervasive, people on the East Bench are affected as well. I haven't heard of the developer setting up a fund for medical treatment.
Thank you.
Next will be Lauren Griffith, followed by Denise Payne, and then Carrie Bry. Lauren is here in person.
Good evening, and thank you, council members, for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Lauren Griffith. I live in District 4. My comments are to just generally express some concerns I have about the vast development that's happening in our city and in the valley, and share with you a little bit of research of concerns I have about pollution and air quality. First of all, I'd like to thank you for removing the industrial and light manufacturing rezoning from North Point small area plan. I would encourage you to preserve that wetland due to our current crisis. We live in a valley that regularly and reliably experiences inversions, and we need to be very cautious about emitting more pollution here. There's a bigger question in facing societies across the world of whether we prioritize profits or people, and I appreciate you listening on the North Point area plan, and I encourage you to be very conscientious of allowing more development and pollution in our valley. Today you discussed the huge cost of suicide in our state and the importance of prioritizing prevention. Johns Hopkins University evaluated over 1,500 cases of suicide in Salt Lake Valley and found with really great statistical certainty that short-term exposure of just 3 days to elevated nitrogen dioxide levels was tied to a 40% increase in the odds of death by suicide. Nitrogen dioxide is something that is emitted by the burning of gas, diesel, and coal, and will be greatly increased in our valley if we are not careful about how we move forward. There are many factors that contribute to suicide, but pollution in our valley is something that we can have an impact on. The University of Utah evaluated over 1,300 cases of tragic and unexpected loss of pregnancy along the Wasatch Front. They found, again with great certainty, that women are 16% more likely to suffer a sudden miscarriage with nitrogen dioxide increase of only 10 parts per billion over a 7-day average. Utah is above the national target for infant deaths due to birth defects, preterm and underweight babies, which are all tied to pollution exposure. Developing on wetlands will speed the lake shrinking and contribute to toxic dust pollution. Dust plumes from the lake bed were measured, and incredibly alarming levels of arsenic, lead, and much more were found. These chemicals are killers and will make our valley uninhabitable. Thank you.
Next will be Denise Payne, followed by Carrie Bry, and then Aaron Chatterton. Denise is here in person.
Yes, I am, and I've been here all day, as you've seen me earlier. I live right in the middle of the North Point master plan that you're talking about, and I have lived with this development that's been going on across the street from me since January 8th. I have a 1 million square foot cement building going up across the street from me. Nothing we can do about it now. Rocky Anderson approved it many years ago. I didn't remember getting a notice about it, but it's happened. Since it's happened, I have to go outside and do yard work with a mask on. I have asthma. I can't deal with construction 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's what they let them do. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and on the weekends. I have constant noise. I have videos of my glasses shattering in my house from semis. And I woke up in the morning to a semi sitting on my property in the front of my house. And they said, well, we didn't know what to do. I said, well, you can't sit in front of my house. That's all they can do. Nobody does anything. Salt Lake County takes care of Dominion Energy, which is putting down a huge construction thing. And Salt Lake City is in charge of the project across from my house. Nobody's out there. I've called Salt Lake City, I don't know how many times. They said, you have to call the state for noise pollution. You have to call the state for light pollution at night. All night long, I have construction going on across my house. I would invite any of you to come out to my house and see what I am dealing with before you even think about approving a master plan. There's no way you can approve a master plan of any kind until you see what we are already dealing with. We cannot do M1 on the other side. Just come out and look at it. See what we're dealing with.
Next will be Carrie Bry, followed by Aaron Chatterton, and then Jean Tabin. Carrie is here in person.
I will speak to just a few of the impacts of this port. I speak for my large family here in this valley and for many friends and for all the beings who are considered voiceless. I do not support the North Point Small Area Master Plan. I do not want the air quality here worsened. I think of the nearby neighborhoods who will be most negatively impacted, and I don't want that for them. The vital habitat for birds and wildlife will be catastrophically injured, and I don't want that. The polluting port will negatively impact the health and well-being of all residents in this valley, and wildlife cannot thrive with the noise, light, and air and water pollution and the runoff of paving and paving. I want Utah to focus on ways to reduce the pollution, not pack it on. This port makes no sense except for the few who will be economically enriched, and that's shameful.
Next is Aaron Chatterton, followed by Jean Tabin, and then Lori Bragg. Aaron is here in person.
Thanks for letting me speak. Aside from all of the other reasons you've heard and you're going to hear why it's a bad idea, I would like to know where you are going to live. Because the sand at the bottom of that lake doesn't care who you vote for. It doesn't care what religion you are. It doesn't care if you are young and inexperienced or if you're selling everybody out and making a buck. It will kill indiscriminately. So I want to know, do you have property for you, your kids, and your grandkids? Because that's what you're going to need if you allow any of this to continue going. If you let this move forward, what will we all do? Either way, I do not support this construction of this polluting port. And I want to thank you for your time.
Next is Jean Tabin, followed by Lori Bragg, and then Robbie Altman. Jean is here in person.
Hi, I'm Jean Tabin. I'm actually from Park City, Utah. I work in Salt Lake, and I'm talking on behalf of myself. I'm a physician, and I work in Salt Lake, and I'm just so frightened what all these warehouses and the loss of wetlands in the Great Salt Lake are going to do to us in Utah as a whole. Thank you if you have stopped the North Point Small Area Master Plan for having warehouses. I really think this land needs to be conserved. I know some of it's being used for agriculture now, and I don't want to, stop anyone who's working there now, but I think in the end we need to try to conserve this land, because even agriculture is not the best for water, for saving our water. Something like with the Utah Open Lands. My original talk was on why warehouses are really, really bad for this undeveloped land. It's gonna, if that continues, the warehouses, it's going to lead to further destruction, obviously, of the Great Salt Lake and the shores, but also increase air pollution, as people have been saying, and we already have so much air pollution. The warehouses lead to trucks that are serving and being served by the warehouses, water, noise, as somebody said, light pollution, traffic congestion. It is bad for the Salt Lake, but it's also bad for local residents and the community that live there. And it's bad for the people of Utah outside of Salt Lake, because what affects the Great Salt Lake in this area affects all of us in Utah and beyond. We already have over 16,000 acres of land in Salt Lake City that are zoned for warehouses. We need to protect what wetlands remain. Warehouses, I think at some point soon, are going to be run by robotics. They have not been a consistent provider of strong jobs. What, they are short-term profits. And excuse me, but we just need to think of our children and our grandchildren. And
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next will be Lori Bragg, followed by Robbie Altman, and then Jason Wessel. Lori is here in person.
Thank you. I am, adjusting my points after having heard that the North Point plan no longer includes plans for warehouses, which is good to hear. And I'll try not to repeat so many things I've already heard that I agree with. And I'll just want to ask, why are we building on any wetlands? And maybe more to the point, how do we not do that? Where is that path? I see the word small in the North Point Small Area Master Plan, and I don't know how big the area is compared to the totality of wetlands and pieces of the Salt Lake, but I wonder, are we voting for death by 1,000 blows? I don't think there's anything too small to matter. I would just ask that these kind of decisions be made in a context that we all are living in a tipping point in terms of quality of life, livability, and sustainability of this fragile place that we live in.
Next is Robbie Altman, followed by Jason Wessel, and then Cindy Cromer. Robbie's here in person.
Hello. So I'm here because I want to talk about the North Point Area Plan. Big surprise, I know. But I'm not really going to add anything else to what's been said because I don't think there is anything to add, but I want to reiterate. I think the consequences of furthering development, not just in North Point, but anywhere else around the Great Salt Lake, will have catastrophic effects that will affect my generation, the current generation, everybody within the entire state. And I think that pollution is completely unfair. It will always end up affecting the marginalized people the most. And I find that the idea that we would continue development in an area that is so, I guess, struggling is just mind-boggling. It's shameful. I think if we were to develop this area further, it would be awful. It would be awful. The ecological effects will be catastrophic. The socioeconomic effects will be catastrophic. Everything that will result from it will be catastrophic and will harm everybody, no matter who you are. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
And next is Jason Wessel, followed by Cindy Cromer, and then Jerry Schmidt. Jason's here in person.
Okay, my name is Jason Wessel. I live in District 1, but I'm here in my capacity as a Vice President of the West Side Coalition. About 6 months ago, back in February, our board held a vote based largely on the outreach and engagement that the West Point Community Council did in North Point on this topic. And we voted to oppose any rezone. Came down to it was going to radically alter the character of North Point, and the residents are overwhelmingly opposed to a rezone. I'm encouraged to hear that a lot of those issues are being addressed, as long as the existing community still opposes any kind of rezone, we're going to support them in that. So I'm just here to reiterate that the West Side Coalition opposes a rezone and that we support the West Point Community Council's position on the topic. Thank you.
Next will be Cindy Cromer, followed by Jerry Schmidt, and then Dorothy Owen. Cindy Cromer's here in person.
I could talk about several land use issues tonight. Proposals coming through under the RMF 30 modifications, North Point, of course, or the number of vacant buildings in Central City. But someone needs to say something nice about former Planning Commissioner Maureen Bachmann, who retired last month while serving as chair because she was term limited. I first heard about former Commissioner Bachmann when she was appointed to the commission. Council member Charlie Luke told me she had worked on his campaign. That information did not prepare me for Bachmann's outstanding performance as a member of the commission. Some of you know me well enough to know that what I was thinking when Charlie Luke told me she worked on my campaign. But I became a fan of Maureen Bachmann. I am grateful for her years of service during some very challenging times. Bachmann rarely explained her votes, but I had a sense that she was not influenced by the commissioner sitting next to her, or the most strident voice on the commission, or a decision that she made before even attending the meeting. She was consistently unpretentious, well-prepared, and deliberative. Maureen Bachmann, always steady, always reasonable, always respectful of the public, is not going to be replaced. We were fortunate to have her volunteer for the city. Thank you.
Next will be Jerry Schmidt, followed by Dorothy Owen, and then Bernie Hart. Jerry's here in person.
Good evening. I'm a resident of District 7, and well, people, thank you for the opportunity to speak and such, and I agree with that. But the real heroes are our veterans. We don't have meetings like this in a room here in America without all those people that sacrifice so much. Whenever I come to a meeting like this, I think about those guys walking up or going up on that beach in Normandy. So they should be remembered at all these meetings. Second, shout out to Jimmy Buffett, who we lost this weekend. And he brought a lot of joy to people in Utah and in his appearances in Salt Lake City. Third, I'd like to welcome Councilwoman Young to the council as my representative. Thank you so much for your email on the renter refund program. Appreciate that. Also sending out love and good vibes to Amy. I also had a letter in the Tribune this weekend for about the renter refund program. It is a program for people 66 and older by the end of last year, or unmarried widows or widowers who were married to their spouse when they passed away. If they are renters and their income is under $38,369, they can get money from the state. And so if you go up to YouTube, don't go to Google, go to YouTube and search Utah Circuit Breaker 2023. There's a lot of residents in this area that can use that assistance. Currently, Salt Lake County residents account for about 63% of the recipients on that right now. And then I did come, the first reason I came was to talk about the rezone. Sounds like you guys are working on that. Do anything you can to protect the birds, the air, the water, the health of the lake, because what the legislature did to us was the most egregious screw job maybe in the history of Utah. So fight it as much as you can. Thank you.
Next will be Dorothy Owen, followed by Bernie Hart, and then Dave Iltis. Dorothy's here in person.
My name is Dorothy Owen, and I have been on the board and an officer for the West Point Community Council for 6 years, going on 20. And I joined the board thinking that I was going to be working on issues related to our largest employer, the Utah State Prison, but instead I spent all that time working on the inland port issues, but more importantly for our local area, the North Point plan, small area plan. Most of you weren't around when we started on this, and so I hope that you spend some time going back and looking at the history of this, including what happened 20 years ago. History has a way of repeating itself, and you don't want to keep making the same mistakes. Going over what happened in North Salt Lake and Salt Lake County, a lot of the same issues also came up, and I regret to say that the concerns that were raised during those times by the local residents have all come true. And the good part of that is that you don't have to decide whether the issues that people raise today are actually legitimate. We have proof now that all those concerns are happening with great intensity. The issue really now is, what are you going to do? And, will future councils, city councils, remember you as people who took advantage of an opportunity, or people that, did not take advantage of that opportunity, took another way out, and left a future council to deal with the problem. And you may have had that experience yourself with previous council people not addressing issues in a forthright manner, and then you're trying to figure it out. It doesn't need to happen again. So with the one thing I want to end is
Dorothy, it's time.
Okay, the job issue, we have been talking to all the employers in the area.
Thank you. Time.
They're not high-paying jobs, and they're not interested in being part of the community. So if you want to keep pushing that,
it's time.
we'd be glad to share our experiences with you.
Next is Bernie Hart, followed by Dave Iltis, and then Mary O'Connell. Bernie's here in person.
I don't know where to start. Margaritaville, and I'm sitting here thinking about Forrest Gump and dumb is as dumb does, and different things, and the gloom and doom, and the young guy over here with his good words and hopefulness, and depending on all us, the older people, to do the right thing. And but sometimes I wonder if we know what the right thing is. And we spend a lot of time arguing about what the right thing is, and most of the time it's pretty obvious. You just do nothing and just sit back and have a margarita and smile a little bit, and the problems will take care of themselves. But gleam of hope. I was here this afternoon when Wayne Niederhauser was here, and I want to thank you for some of the questions that were asked and some of the sort of a hint of a redirection by some of the questions, because years ago when I started addressing the homeless issue, I always had confidence in the city council ability to take a leadership role on the issue, because you did the funding for the city, you did the funding for some different things in the city. You didn't have an agenda connected to the problem, and I had hopes that you were going to take a leadership on solving the issue. So when it was suggested today that the city council and the city, not the county and not the state, could play a much bigger role in finding solutions to this problem, I was ready to jump up and cheer. So we'll be doing what we can to encourage you to take a bigger and bigger role. And when you go to approve something and some funding and some financing for any project in the city, I would ask you to start asking, first maybe have a margarita, and then start asking some tougher questions. So thank you very much.
Next will be Dave Iltis, followed by Mary O'Connell, and then Colin Williams. Dave, you may now unmute.
Hi, my name's Dave Iltis. I wanted to comment on a few things. First is on the North Point area plan. Please do your best to preserve the land. What's going on out there is a tragedy. It's also one of the best recreational bicycle rides in Salt Lake City, and please protect that, because transportation does not seem to be too interested in complete streets out there. Also, a connector trail through the Jordan OHV Park would be helpful as part of this. The main thing, though, that I wanted to comment on is that Salt Lake City is shifted to Vision Zero, but there's not a lot of evidence that's going on. And part of that is because of the disorganization of the departments within Salt Lake. So this is directed at the mayor, if she's still here, and the council is, please consolidate streets, engineering, and transportation into one department, so that we don't have streets feuding with transportation about who's going to restripe a roadway when it's repaved. So, for example, 600 East, the bike lane is still not fixed 2 years later. 1000 East, 10th East by First South is not fixed after a year. There are plenty of other examples too. And lastly, as part of this, you did the 20 is plenty ordinance to reduce speed limits on residential streets to 20 miles an hour. Please follow this up with arterials and reduce the speed there, like Seattle has done, to 25 miles an hour, so that we stop being addicted to speed and we make our streets safer for bicyclists, pedestrians, and car drivers. But council, please do something. Please don't just do nothing. Thank you.
Next will be Mary O'Connell, followed by Colin Williams, and then Soren Simonson. Mary's here in person.
Hi, my name is Mary O'Connell. I live on Sunnyside Avenue across from Sunnyside Park. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I feel sort of silly bringing up my concerns to you with all of the comments that I've been hearing tonight about the North Point plan, but I want all of you to hear our concerns before the University of Utah bulldozes their plans over Sunnyside Park. I recently, with many neighbors, formed the Friends of Sunnyside Park. We formed this very important group after we were told in our April Yale-Crest community meeting by the University of Utah's community communication director and the assistant athletic director of the university's plans to replace the existing baseball practice field with their new home stadium. This concerns us because it goes against the 2017 East Bench Master Plan, which included the university, and they stated they would not build their home stadium in the northwest corner of Sunnyside Park. We're worried because the building of a collegiate stadium would require them buying or receiving more of the land currently in Sunnyside Park, which is green space. Mayor Mendenhall has twice refused to give or sell the university land in Sunnyside Park, and we want to thank you, Mayor Mendenhall. This is really a time-sensitive matter. Because of our concerns, we are asking you all to immediately intervene and stop any current or future actions, processes, plans, and designs by the university to replace the existing field with a new, bigger stadium, road, or public parking. If the U is allowed to move forward with their plans, it will encroach and have detrimental impacts on this highly used public park used by the residents up and down the Wasatch Front.
Mary,
We
thank you.
formed this group
Time.
to enhance, protect,
Time.
and preserve.
Mary,
and
time.
We do not want to lose 1 square inch of Sunnyside Park.
Thank you.
Next will be Colin Williams, followed by Soren Simonson, and then Heidi Hoban. Colin's here in person.
Thank you for hearing me again. As the council seems to be looking at a lot of different changes in zoning and in building codes, I wanted to hopefully put an earworm into your ears as you look forward to the future, and that's in regards to making sure that we have a habitable city. Right now, I really commend what we guys just recently did with the EV Readiness program, making sure that there's going to be electric vehicle charging stations at residential locations. One of the things that we've seen, though, in electric vehicle communities is that there's a worry about long-term impact on the grid, and that people will need to also be charging at work during the day in order to spread out the electrical usage over the day. So I would hope that you would, number one, look at increasing the EV readiness also to building, also matching that with the city's infrastructure. So when you're redoing anything like a parking meter or a light post, taking that advantage and that opportunity to right now build that infrastructure for charging for those vehicles that do need to be used in the areas where we aren't having walking communities. Also looking at the dwelling unit requirements for electrification. The city only requires 60 amps minimum to a dwelling unit, whereas something like a Tesla Model 3 is going to require 50 amps of power to it. Looking at changing that possibly both to a higher minimum standard, but also basing it on perhaps a square footage of a dwelling unit for other things that are going to be electrified in the future, could help the city look forward to 20 or 30 years down the future where we might not be heating our homes with things such as gas. And that's the other place where I wanted to hopefully put an earworm in of the recommendations for these new building codes, looking away from gas, which has a significant contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, and towards electric modifications to things like heat pumps and possibly having those requirements in residential or buildings. So in summation, to make sure that we electrify everything, have that infrastructure available, and that we can spread that infrastructure usage out over the course so that 30 years from now we don't have a dry lake due to using gas ovens.
And next will be Soren Simonson, followed by Heidi Hoban, and then Jade Cantwell. Soren's here in person.
Thank you. Good evening. I'll try and be a little dense here. I'm pack a couple of comments in. First, just wearing my constituent hat. I want to thank you for your work on the Sugarhouse Business District change to eliminate drive-throughs. I will just suggest that this is a beginning, not an end, because there are at least 15 zoning districts in what we commonly call the Sugarhouse Business District, and tonight we've only taken action on 2 of them. I hope that there's more work to come on that, but we applaud your work in that direction. Second of all, I want to, I know you're considering the rezone for the fleet block, and I know there's some discussion about maybe looking at some comprehensive zoning changes citywide. I will suggest that zoning, which was developed a century ago, was really a 20th century tool. We know that it has not worked well in creating livable, walkable vibrant communities. And I would encourage you to look at form-based zoning or form-based code beyond the zoning light that we use for the entire city. It's really time, and we need that for a 21st century city. I'm going to quickly put on my hat as the Jordan River Commission Director. I want to encourage you to look carefully at the materials we distributed with a coalition of us that have worked for the last several years on the North Point Small Area Plan Advisory Committee. We've sent by email and hand-delivered some ideas. I think to Councilmember Petro's comments earlier today, the solutions that we have offered to you, which do frame this as an environmental justice issue, I think are a much more practical, appropriate, and sensitive solution to this particular neighborhood, and we hope they'll give it a serious look. If there's an opportunity, our coalition would love to come and present these in a formal public meeting so others have the benefit of hearing what we've shared with many of you individually as well. If there's an opportunity for that, we would love to request that time with the council. Thank you.
Next will be Heidi Hoven, followed by Jade Cantwell. Heidi's here in person.
Hello, I'm Heidi Hoven. I live in District 6 and work for Audubon Rockies at Fillmore Sanctuary. I'm in support of passing the North Point Small Area Plan, providing the following amendments in order to stop additional reckless warehouse construction like that happening this minute and implement safeguards for our watershed and the people dependent upon it for clean air, reduction in pollution, and safer water for Great Salt Lake and its wildlife through subsequent zoning and development land and conservation tools. As Soren mentioned, we've submitted a recent comment from our Shoreland Heritage Working Group. And some of these are just supplemental to those notes. I ask the council to please include the following. In support of Councilmember Petro's proposal from today's work session, annex unincorporated agricultural lands as Salt Lake City agricultural zoned land that could benefit from transfer of purchase of development rights, conservation easements, and or other zoning that would conserve the health and welfare of local residents and the watershed. Language that acknowledges and integrates the Salt Lake County's shoreline heritage area and applies the preservation tools identified in the North Point Small Area Plan to benefit the health and welfare of local residents and the watershed. An alternative vision map that reflects that integration, such as the new alternative vision map our Shoreline Heritage Area Working Group provided you last week to benefit the health and welfare of local residents and watershed. And you see there's a common thread here that is purposeful because there seemed to be a disconnect, that it's an either or, vice versa, environmental issues versus environmental justice. And they really speak to a lot of the common objectives. And I'm out of time, but anyway, that was the main point.
Thank you very much.
Next will be Jade Cantwell.
Hello, I'm from Ogden, Utah. My name is Jade Cantwell. Coming down tonight. I'm not an expert. I appreciate everything you all do. One of the big things as an observer and a longtime resident of Utah that I do see, I used to have, my best friend is an architect, and so I understand, and my father's a construction carpenter. So I understand a little bit about that, but Utah, Ogden's got the issue with the Union Station, and they want to do multi-use development and low-income housing, which would be like $1,200 a month rent. You know, and then up in Eden, where I actually live, people are building roads on their own land, but on wetlands, you know, and then we've got this project that everybody's talking about and that fleet block. There's a theme here, and I agree with this idea that these piecemeal zoning and approaching it that way, in one hand, is good because you have attention to detail for that specific area. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that there's money involved. Developers like money, and we also need to think about the history and the land and the people that occupy that area that's being developed, multi-use for their purposes and their needs. And I think a lot of times that gets polluted with the developers, you know, human greed and human desire to, you know, fill their pockets. And so that's my observation watching everything tonight. Thank you.
That was the final registered commenter.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the comments tonight. I appreciate that very much, and I very appreciate the decorum and the way the meeting went along. So we move on to item. We have no new business. We have no unfinished business. On to item G, consent. And we'll look for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second. I have a motion from Councilman Puig, second from Councilman Romano. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you.